Good. All right. You're welcome. My name is Marenika Upong. I work with the Community Liaison, the CROI Community Liaison Subcommittee. And with me are two panelists with one thing in common. They are interested in cure research, and they are cure research advocates. A few years before now, no one would have ever thought about the possibility of HIV cure. But at the 2017 CROI conference, there were quite a lot of discussions around cure research. Plenary sessions, poster discussions, symposia. Howbeit, the research is basically still at preliminary stage. A lot of that has to do with basic research. But despite what the researchers are doing, we also have advocates working in the field of cure research, and they had started a long time ahead of now. One of those advocates is David Evans, and a young, interested advocate is Florita Joroke.
Thank you.
So I'm going to have them introduce themselves, and we'll discuss about what cure research is all about, and what cure research advocacy is all about. What does it mean to do this, and where do we think we're heading with cure research advocacy? So David, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm David Evans. I work as my formal official title is Director of Research Advocacy. I'm with a nonprofit called Project Inform, an NGO. And our focus is on HIV and hepatitis C. And we focus on making sure that the research goes quickly, that it is ethical, that it involves the community. We also try to ensure that there are systems in place to ensure access to treatment for HIV and hepatitis C. And then we do education for people affected by or at risk for or living with both of those diseases.
Yeah. Florita?
Thank you so very much. I'm Dureke Florita. I work with an organization called NAVMAS, New HIV Vaccine and Microbicide Advocacy Society. I'm so much involved in community engagement and research literacy as it relates to biomedical HIV prevention tools. So we have been engaged in this process over the years. Most recently, we are participating actively in the PrEP demonstration study that has to do with getting the community to understand what the concept of PrEP study is all about, getting them to understand their role in terms of research and how community can actually support research. So with emerging issues in terms of HIV research and development, we have a new era of cure research, and we felt we could actually use our current position to integrate cure research literacy into what we are doing, believing that we're going to make more impact in terms of getting community prepared for cure research studies, as well as rolling out a possible cure outcome at the community level. Thank you.
Great. Yeah. So I'm coming back to you, David. What's cure research advocacy?
Sure. Well, it's really new in some ways, but not in others. And it kind of traces my own development in becoming a research activist. In the early 1990s, I had a partner who was HIV positive, and my cousin was HIV positive, and I had friends who were dying, and we knew almost nothing about the disease. There were there were only 2 approved treatments, and they didn't work very well. And I started volunteering at Project Inform, and some of my mentors were concerned, because a lot of the research was looking at trying to do something about the virus, but so many people had broken immune systems, and there didn't seem to be a lot of research on how you might restore the immune system if someone had progressed in HIV disease. And then the big conference in Vancouver came at 1996, and the introduction of the protease inhibitors. And I did see literally people brought back from the brink of death. But then David Ho, the big doctor, said a cure would be there in 2 years. And I remember thinking at myself is that, okay, well, let's put aside even getting it to people and just think, okay, well, is this really possible? And given that my mentors were really focused on the immune system and what I had learned, I thought, I think this is going to be more complicated than just keeping the virus down. And in fact, it turned out to be the case.
Exactly.
So fast forward to 2008, and Timothy Brown, his case was first reported here at CROI, not at this building. And it was a tiny little poster in the hallway. It wasn't even a big presentation. And my mentor, Martin Delaney, called me the next day and he said, there's this poster and it says there's this guy who has been off treatment for 2 years and the virus didn't come back. And we were like, whoa, you know, and we got in touch with a researcher and it kind of set everything off. And since then, it's been kind of so hectic of having, you know, it's the science is very complicated. It's very new. And so the question is, you know, we did a good job of explaining the technical science for prevention, you know, with PrEP and also with treatment, like what does viral load mean? What does CD4 mean? But now we need a whole generation of activists who we're asking them to know so much more. So I don't know, maybe I'm going on too long.
No,
but
no.
Yeah,
You're perfect.
Yeah.
You're perfect. You're perfect. So what do you think this would mean for you? Your interest, it's new. How far have you gone with what you're doing? And then you're going to latch this on. What do you think this is for you?
I think for me, it means a lot looking at it from various perspectives. In terms of community literacy, understanding the areas of HIV treatment, understanding prevention, and now tailoring it down to the concept of HIV cure. So it's critical that community understand what the whole process and what it entails. Because coming from a developing country where there is a lot of misconceptions and media reporting on issues on HIV cure and all that, so it gives a very wrong perception. So it becomes critical that we prepare the community to really understand the issue of cure, HIV cure research, and be able to integrate it, internalize it, and be able to make informed decisions on issues around that. So this is currently lacking in Nigeria because I read a lot of reports. I think recently we had a publication that says there is HIV cure, and the community picks it up from there.
Yeah.
So that is the angle I'm coming from. And NAVMAS over the years have done a lot of extensive work in terms of advocacy around biomedical HIV prevention research, specifically looking at the biomedical HIV tools like PrEP, treatment as prevention, microbicides, and the rest of it. So I think they're one of the first organizations that have conceptualized that HIV vaccine, microbicides should come together. So we want to move forward by integrating cure-reside literacy. And we felt this is a great opportunity to learn what is currently on the field and how do we move on with the agenda. But we have wide range of community advocates and boarding advocates that are very much interested in learning issues on cure-reside literacy and moving on with it.
Yeah, thank you, Florida. So I come back to you, David. I mean, one of the things that I'm curious about is the lexicons around HIV cure. I mean, prior to now, thanks to TAPS and PrEP, there was the treatment world, there was the prevention world. There almost was a PrEP world until treatment as prevention came, and then all of us got integrated. What do you think that this means for advocates in general in terms of the cure lexicon? What does it mean in terms of developing a new crop of advocates? I mean, what are you seeing and what are you hoping for?
Sure. Well, there are going to be some things that are different depending on where you live in the world. And I mean, even if we just talk about the United States, there are parts of the United States where there are different levels of education and poverty and connection to, you know, literally is research within 100 miles of you. So even within the United States, there are differences, but I think there are also commonalities no matter where we are on the globe. And I'll talk a little bit about that. You mentioned lexiconography. I mean, the words themselves, cure, remission, you know, and it's interesting because when I talk to people, when they think cure, they think, okay, HIV is gone from my body, I can't transmit HIV to my partner, and I don't have the antibodies. So if I go and take a test, it's going to say you're negative. And so I think that's critical, and we have to be careful. But I think also some of the researchers are getting a little bit more, they like the word remission. But I did a focus group in Los Angeles, all with HIV positive women, and I kind of put it out there and I said, you know, hey, researchers use these different words. And universally, all of those women said, I had cancer, or my mother had cancer, or my aunt had cancer. and they told her she was in remission, and then it came back and she died. And so I think that there's another word that we have to be, oh my God, so careful. But like you were saying, and like you were saying, I think the world's come together now, because one of the things we're learning is that if we catch people really early, maybe when we find a cure, it will work better in them. And we need to study that. So like, for instance, there's the FRESH cohort in KwaZulu-Natal where they're looking at testing young women, and if they test positive, because they test them really frequently, they immediately put them on antiviral therapy, which is not only good for them, it also lets us to understand in women like what happens with the virus and the reservoir. So that was a study, not necessarily a cure study, but it became a cure study in a way. In San Francisco, we were looking at PrEP, and we realized, oh my God, we're testing these guys like all the time. And sure enough, we've caught a number of guys maybe within days of becoming infected. So now we have PrEP turning into cure, you know, also turning into treatment because they're getting on treatment. So I don't know if that's your experience, but yeah.
I think it's something that is very, very interesting.
Yeah.
It's an area that is evolving either in terms of looking at the PrEP study or looking at the treatment as prevention. You know, invariably we're looking at how best can people achieve viral suppression, have their reservoir under control, and they move on with their life. So whichever way that we look at it is an evolving area of research, and it's critical. But for us, as in the community from developing countries, we need to have a clear understanding of what the concept is. It's very, very critical that we have a definition of what cure is. What does it mean? Does it mean I'm off the virus? Does it mean I'm off the antibody? What is that specific? It's very critical that we have that definition at the global level, so we'll be able to articulate the message that goes down to the community. So probably developing a terminology definition around cure and cure result literacy will be very, very critical. So there is uniformity in terms of the message that goes out there.
Absolutely.
I mean, I remember also very early in the evolution of HIV literacy, we actually had to develop a directory of what the terminologies is, and it was used also to teach media and all that. But going forward, I'll come back to you. Do you anticipate challenges in terms of, you know, cure research advocacy or cure research literacy in the context of Nigeria or the developing countries? Do you see any challenges?
For me, I see potentials in terms of delivery on the area of cure research literacy. I also see some challenges in terms of getting stakeholders to buy into the concept. So it's something very critical. For instance, we talked about PrEP, and we know that there are a lot of opposition looking at Africans, developing countries have not been able to place their people on treatment, and you're talking about PrEP. We're also going to see that type of opposition, saying, what do you mean by cure research literacy? What are you really talking about? But then we have the potential in terms of community that are willing to follow with the trend of research in HIV and AIDS. You know, having worked over the years, you know, from the boarding where we are just using ABC and evolving to where we have new tools like PrEP, treatment and preventions and all that. So we have very interested group of boarding advocates that will be willing to accept the process. But definitely we're going to have challenges in terms of getting stakeholders to buy into it, and in terms of investments in cure research literacy at the developing countries, Nigeria in particular as well.
So if I go back to the US, do you have any national policy, national programs? Is there anything from the government that is embracing what you're doing in cure research right now?
Yeah, I would say not at first, but now. So there in the U.S., actually it's global. It's managed in the United States, but we have research programs happening in a number of countries, and I think there might be a couple of African countries as well. But we call them collaboratories. And they're called collaboratories, which actually isn't a real word, because it is a partnership between a university and a company, like a pharmaceutical company. And usually when the government funds something, it doesn't overlap like that. But then there's the third arm of the stool, which is community. And so there are community advisory boards for, now there are 6 research collaboratories devoted to cure in the United States, but also, like I said, there are some sites elsewhere. But you know, as you said, I mean, it's really, it's a big hurdle to go from where we were and people's expertise and their knowledge to where they are now. So we're really kind of figuring out, like, what are the most important things? I mean, you know, with PrEP or vaccines or treatment, as hard as it was, in some ways the concepts are familiar.
Yeah.
Because like virus bad, immune system good, you know? And here it's so crazy with cure because it's sort of like this little piece of the immune system good, this little piece of the immune system bad, and this piece we don't know. So it's like, how do you do education when it's like that, you know? So, yeah. And plus the scientists themselves are figuring out as we go along. So
I think that's peculiar also,
Yeah.
because we're following an evolving field.
Yeah.
And we're starting at the very beginning of an evolving field.
Yeah.
I think that's something to. But I'm also aware that you have a curriculum, a care curriculum. You want to say something about this?
Sure. So on the website for AVAC, which is they do global prevention research and analysis, it's www.avac.org. AVAC. They host an online set of slides and recordings of calls that have taken place that people, if they have access to a computer and a speedy internet line, could engage in. But we're very interested actually in continuing to revise them and to make them more simple, to make them sort of span someone's knowledge level. So that is one of the areas that we're looking to. And as you said, I mean, a lot of times when we're engaging with the community now, they tell us like, well, I'm scared because my people don't have a place to live. They don't have food. They don't, they can't even get their antiviral meds, and now you want me to come and be an advocate about cure. So I think that our job, or I feel like my job, is not only to be the advocate at the table with the scientists, but it's to take from them the information to my community and say, this is what seems really relevant.
Okay.
Like, for instance, we haven't done a lot of work on women living with HIV and cure research. And there are some big differences that we have to pay attention to. So I want to empower HIV positive women to have an influence on the trial and say, okay, well, what parts are most interesting for you? Cure research has not focused on the strains of HIV that are more common in Africa. You know, we have clade B in the United States and Europe, and clade C, D, A are so much more common in Africa, but most of the cure research has not happened on those strains of the virus. So I think getting you all involved and really demanding that, no, we need to do more research here. Yeah.
And just before I round up, how do you think you're going to move this forward in the context from where you're coming from?
I think the first thing is to learn from what is currently happening in the US. It's very critical to see how they're able to come up to the level where they are, and also leverage on the materials he talked about. Excellent. And then go back to synthesize and say, well, how do I put together these ideas to make meaning and meet the need of Nigerians. I think that's the first thing that I have to do, and then with that, I'll be able to share with other advocates on how we can track that process. But I don't know if there could be a learning process from...
That would be wonderful to work together.
Sure that would be great. I'm sure they're also evolving cure research advocates in Africa that would be central to translating things, what's happening, and ensure it's relevant to the context of Africa and the way we think. So on the last word, what are you looking forward to? What is your expectation in terms of outcomes of this that you're doing in the next By the time we come here next year, what do you think? What do you think? Yeah.
Well, you know, I feel like what I'm working on in the next year is building support and knowledge in the community. And that both here in the United States and then partnering, have already talked to folks at AVAC. I talked to a gentleman who is the head of the AfroCab about how to start collaborating.
That's great.
And providing the tools we have and developing wherever we are and then learning from each other. Because I don't think there's any one person or place that does it best. And I think there's so much we can learn from each other.
Yeah. And then with Florida, in terms of 2030, I mean, there's this global move towards ending the AIDS epidemic in 2030. How do you feel in terms of cure research? Is there a sense of being left behind or not being left behind, or you think we're going to catch up and just indeed join the world in ending
I think
the
we're already
epidemic?
making effort towards the 1990 target, and I don't think we're going to be left behind in terms of following with the trend of the cure research.
Excellent.
So we have already set the pace, discussing how we can move the agenda.
Yeah.
And maintaining the momentum and the interest, I think we can get there.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
So
thank
we
you.
did hear from the panelists about cure research and cure research advocacy. I think for me, the take-home message is that this is a critical area we have to engage in very early now, and as early as, and moving with the researcher as the cure research evolves. But most importantly, we also appreciate the fact that there might be geographical differences and what we have to do, but then there has to be collaboration on that.
Yeah.
So on that note, we look forward to what 2018 CROI will bring.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.